Okay, so for our example of a really bad design, which will have low cohesion and tight coupling, we have this app where basically when you enter your name here, and as you type, it will tell you the numeric value of your name based on the ASCII character values that you enter. And as you erase, basically any press any key, the value will be updated. So let's go ahead and take a look as to how we did that. This is our browser sync, and our app consists of two things: the index.html and app.js. And this is located in lecture02 folder, which is located in your examples folder of the Git repository that hopefully you cloned that has examples for the rest of the course. And in our HTML, we really need to pay attention to only a couple of tags. One is this input tag, which has an ID name that we're going to attach some behavior to. And the other one is a placeholder tag with an ID output. And now if we jump over to our app.js, which is, by the way, is included obviously in this page, so you could act on it. And in app.js, what we have here, we have a object literal student with a name at this point as an empty string, and the type of student is a student. In the next few lines, what we're doing really is just setting up some listeners for different events. The first one is DOM content loaded listener, and that listener basically, as you know from previous course, is just going to fire this function when the entire page is loaded and is instantiated inside the browser's memory. So therefore, all the HTML has been processed at the time that this content loaded function is fired. And the content loaded function, all it does is just looks for the ID or the element with an ID name. As you can remember, that's our input field right here. And what it does is it sets up a listener, key up listener, that says every time you press a key inside of that text box, I want you to fire this key up function. So the key up function does nothing more than call this calculate numeric output to calculate the numeric value of whatever has been entered into our input text box. So let's take a look at this calculate numeric output. What it does is, again, grabs the value of the input field in our HTML page and saves it into that object student.name. And what it does next is it loops over that student.name and basically looks at a character code at each position within the string. Once it kind of adds them all up, it creates an output string, total numeric value of a person's name is, and just adds to it the total numeric value. And then it goes ahead and pulls the element that has the ID output and sets its inner text property to our output. Well, what's wrong with this code? Well, quite a few things actually. Let's take a look at our index.html. Index.html is there to display things. It's there to present things. So therefore, it's a really separate piece from the functionality. We've learned about the three different core technologies, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Well, HTML and CSS is really there to present things. It's not really there to have functionality. So it would be really bad, in fact, it would be tight coupling, if I would change something in my HTML and that would completely break or affect the way I implement my functionality in my JavaScript. So for example, as a designer, I might decide that, you know what, I don't want your name to be here. I really want full name to be here. And therefore, name doesn't really quite distinguish it enough. So I would want to change it to say full name instead of just name. Well, what would that do? What that would do is it would break our application. So if we go back to our app and start typing here, obviously nothing will happen because our app.js is trying to attach the key up behavior to this particular element with the ID name. Well, it's no longer the ID name. So what do we have here? We have tight coupling because our application code, our app.js, very tightly depends on how our index.html, our presentation code, is written. And that's a really bad thing. And obviously it goes not just for this, but it goes for other things inside here, like for example, the output ID as well. We're directly accessing this output right inside of our app.js code. But let's take a look at this calculate numeric output function. This function should really do just one thing, or at least have very closely related things inside of it. But if you take a closer look, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff there that really seemingly completely unrelated to calculating numeric value of a string, because that's really all we want. And here what we're doing is we're again reaching out to our HTML, making it a tight coupling, but we're also at the same time calculating the total value. But we don't stop there. We go and take that value and insert some text inside of our HTML document. So really, this calculate numeric output is doing way too many unrelated things. It would be much better if this functionality of actually inserting our result into the page was really completely separated from this function. And the functionality of getting the value that we want to get the numeric value of, get that string, should also be a separate thing. And really, the calculate numeric output really should just be calculate numeric, passing it a string, and then just getting the primary functionality and the single functionality of just calculating the numeric value, and everything else should be out of it. So this is in a microcosm. It's obviously not a big deal in a small application, but in a microcosm, this is an example of low cohesion, because in the same function, we have functionality that is really not that closely related to each other. And that is an example, at least in a microcosm again, of low cohesion. So to summarize, we spoke about why software gets complex as it grows. And one of the main reasons that we spoke about was the lack of high cohesion. In other words, how well does one thing stick to doing just that one thing? The other part was loose coupling. And loose coupling is when change in one component doesn't really affect another component. And we saw an example in a real web app, what happens when you have tight coupling. HTML, remember, is just presentation, and JavaScript is our functionality. So when things inside HTML or changes inside HTML directly affect and make us change things inside our JavaScript, that's an example of tight coupling that we would really want to avoid. And an example of low cohesion was when our one function really seemingly did three fairly unrelated things. So what we really want in our software is high cohesion and loose coupling. And as we go forward, you'll see how AngularJS lets us accomplish these goals.